Hello everybody and welcome to the Import-Export Hub channel. Bogdan here, your not so boring host for the next couple of minutes, and without further ado, let's dive into today's subject, which is about what to import from Morocco, of course, based on my opinion. And here I will limit myself as usual to just 5 big categories. I will show you the main trading partners for Morocco's export flow, and where possible I will give you a couple of examples in order to somehow narrow down the exact driver for each category. So let's start with my first recommendation, which is coming from chapter 16, heading 4, and we have prepared or preserved fish, caviar included. And here we see how Morocco's exports are quite diversified in terms of trading partners, and they're spread all over the world. And I don't know, in this top 10 list, we have countries from Europe like France, Spain, or Italy. We have a couple of African countries like Ghana and Nigeria, but also the United States on the other side of the Atlantic, for example, with some $75 million worth of exports in 2020. In terms of the overall trend, we have an upward one from 2016 onwards with a peak in 2020 and a year-on-year positive change of 4% compared with 2019. And guys, speaking here of year-on-year changes and limiting myself to these top 10 partners, except with Spain, Italy, and Nigeria, who all imported less in 2020. With the rest of them, we have positive changes ranging from 3, almost 4%, to almost 40%, as in the case here with Ghana, for example. But the performer in terms of absolute positive change is the United States, who in 2020 imported with some $19.5 million more than it did the previous year. As for the main drivers for both the United States and Spain, we have HS code 160413. So we're talking about prepared or preserved sardines. Now moving on to my second recommendation, guys, which is coming from chapter 8, and we have citrus fruits, fresh or dried, from subheading 5. And here again we see a nice upward trend with a modest positive change in 2020 of almost 3%, but nonetheless positive, with the Russian Federation, Canada, and the Netherlands as the main trading partners. But we have also countries like, I don't know, the United Kingdom, Sweden, or Saudi Arabia here in this top 10 list. For example, again, just limiting myself to mention just a few. In terms of year-on-year changes, we have Russia with some 25% drop in its imported value compared with the previous year, which is more or less $40 million in absolute terms, which is quite a lot if you ask me. Then we see that also Sweden, Saudi Arabia, and Senegal all imported less in 2020, but frankly, these didn't weight as much as Russia did. So this is why we see this modest 3% change. On the other hand, there were positive changes in relation with Canada, the Netherlands, and Spain, for example. The latter somehow partially counterbalancing Russia's fall in the imports volume with some $19 million more imports. As for the main drivers here, we have HS code 080520 for both Russia and Saudi Arabia. So we're talking about fresh or dried mandarins, including tangerines and other varieties. And with this second recommendation being also covered, guys, I will now move on to my third one, which is mineral or chemical phosphatic fertilizers, as Morocco is a pretty big player, let's say, in the phosphatic fertilizer production worldwide. And here, although until 2019 the trend was upwards, in 2020 the exports shrunk almost a quarter. bringing the absolute exported figure to some $277 million, with Brazil here, Bangladesh, and France driving most of the imports from Morocco. But of course, there are other important trading partners like, I don't know, Cote d'Ivoire, the United Kingdom, Ghana, or Turkey, again, just to name a few. Relative to the year-on-year changes, Brazil and Bangladesh, who both had a big weight the previous year, so in 2019, had negative changes for 2020, with Bangladesh importing with almost $19 million less in 2020, so quite a major drop there. While in terms of positive changes in this top 10 list, the biggest change, both in absolute and relative terms, was in relation with France, which is a traditional trading partner for Morocco, who imported with 73% more in 2020 than it did the previous year. As for the main drivers, here we have HS code 310310, so super phosphates used for encouraging strong growth for both Bangladesh and the United Kingdom. Now guys, moving on to my fourth recommendation, I couldn't stop mentioning, of course, the olive oil. So we have chapter 15 from subheading 9, and sadly, I wasn't able to see the split here between bulk and bottled exports, but my personal guess is that the bulk exports make up for more than 95% of all the exports from this chapter, and we have basically $36.5 million worth of exports for 2020. Which is almost 46% down from 2019, with the United States, Spain, and the Netherlands driving most of the imports from Morocco, with a very high concentration in the United States, with some 50% of all the exports being directed towards them, of course, from this subchapter. In terms of year-on-year changes, the traditional trading partners and, I don't know, big volume importers like the United States and Spain both imported less in 2020. The biggest absolute change happening with Spain, sorry, who imported with some $22 million less, so quite understandable the overall drop. On the other hand, we have, I don't know, second or third tier partners like Malaysia or Belgium, who imported more in 2020, but the absolute change for these two countries is somehow negligible, insignificant if you compare with the 2019 figures of the United States or Spain. As for the main drivers, no-brainer here, we have virgin oil, so HS code 150910, driving most of the exports of Morocco towards both the Netherlands and Malaysia. And guys, finally we're approaching the end of the video, as I will now move on to my fifth and last recommendation. Bear with me, which is somehow also fruit related, but this time we have subheading 11 from chapter 8. So fruit and nuts, and here we see again a nice upward trend from 2016 onwards, with almost all the top 10 trading partners being developed countries, except maybe China here. Although China's status, if you ask me, is somehow debatable, but this is another story. Relative to the exported value, we have some $127 million overall, with Spain, the Netherlands, and again France capturing some 60% of Morocco's exports from this chapter. But there are other important partners like, I don't know, Germany, the United States, or Japan, again, just to name a few. Relative to the year-on-year changes here, the exported value was up almost 10% in relative terms and some $11 million in absolute ones, with Belgium here, Germany and Canada also contributing the most to the change in the absolute value change. We have some lower exported values towards the Netherlands, the United States, China, or Japan here. But fortunately for the Moroccan exporters, these weren't that steep, nor didn't wait that much, at least if we think at China and Japan. As for the main driver here, we have HS code 8081110, so frozen strawberries driving most of the exports towards both France and China. So guys, there you are. These were the 5 recommendations. Thank you all for watching. I really hope that you've liked it. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe buttons, and as usual, until next time, keep your business safe. Thanks.